Larry Ossei Mensah, today's guest, is one of the biggest, I could say, forces and curators of Black art, and is using this as a forum to kind of redefine how we see ourselves and the world around us. He's the co founder of Art Noir, which is a nonprofit whose mission is to drive racial equity in the art world. And he's an angel investor who's organized many exhibitions and programs at both commercial and nonprofit spaces for prominent and rising creatives of color. Before he paints a deeper picture around what he's all about, I would love to know, when you hear culture, what does that mean to you, my friend?
Thank you for inviting me on here. When I hear culture, I just think about flavor. I think
Mm.
about black and brown folks, whether it's African American, from the diaspora, Southeast Asia, Latin America. I think all the things that make our lives rich and interesting, um, flavorful, whether that's food, fashion, music. Um, I think all the things that kind of make life worthwhile. And I think, for many of us who work in this space, whether it's in the visual arts or whether it's through advertising or cinema, we are all creating things that add value to our daily lives. And so for me, it's about adding value, adding flavor, and, making life interesting.
Yeah, value and flavor, two very strong descriptives for that. I gave a very high level breakdown on you. I would love for you to share a little bit more about yourself for the people before we get deep into the convo of your presence within this art culture space.
Yeah. So Larry Ossei Mensah, I am first generation Ghanaian American, born in Harlem, raised in the Bronx. I came to art first through music. So from my junior year of high school to senior year of college, I actually interned at different record companies because I wanted to be a record man. I wanted to be where everybody was trying to be Puff. I wanted to be L.A. Reid,
Oh,
you
interesting.
know,
Okay,
because
and
L.A.
give the differentiation. Give the difference. What's the
So I
difference?
think so I think Puff is, and this is all from watching from a distance. I mean, definitely entrepreneurial, innovative, but LA for me is someone who's just aged like a fine wine,
Mm,
right? Going from being a drummer, to songwriting, to, with Babyface building LaFace and changing the conversation around music in the South. And it's just, Puff is dope. Like, I admire what he does and what he's been able to do in music, in the spirit space. But LA is just like that smooth cat. Like, I was at Usher, I think, last month for my birthday, and I saw LA with Shaka Zulu, and
the family.
it's still looking smooth. I'm like, you
That's
know,
my guy.
yeah. And I think, whether it's him, Puff, Jerry Wexler, or Quincy Jones, I wanted to be a record man in terms of like identifying the talent, cultivating them, and then giving them a platform,
Mm,
right? But I kind of realized that music was not going to be the platform for me to do that, because there were just things that I saw structurally within the business. And I'm also in it, when it's going from physical to digital and they didn't know what to do,
right.
you know. So I kind of pivoted out of that, worked in advertising. But that experience gives me the foundation in terms of how I think about art and commerce, right? And the possibilities for a creative to create a sustainable, hopefully fiscal sustainable life and career. And so that still guides a lot of the decisions I make. My friends who stayed in the business, they're all senior level execs. They're collecting, so it's great to talk to them
Right.
about like their journey on that end. But did advertising. They went to grad school to study marketing and hospitality management. So I moved to Switzerland, and part of this was inspired by reading Quincy Jones's book. And just thinking about like him, Baldwin, Nina Simone, like all of these incredible creatives, they had to step away from what was happening here to find who they were as an individual, right?
Mm,
And so I had an opportunity to do some work with the World Economic Forum that introduced me to Switzerland and a lot of my community there. I ironically met Quincy, and I was 24 at the time, so as a 24-year-old, you want the secret to life,
that's
which there's
right.
no like one answer. But he says travel and see the world and see how other people live. That is the best education you're ever going to get.
That's right.
And so I took that to heart. And so that's where like the nickname Young Global came from. But, I've just been on this journey. So I was on this journey finding myself, and started doing photography when I moved back to the States from school, and then realized that being a photographer wasn't like my thing, but the
Hmm.
art thing, the community, the camaraderie was my thing. So it's like finding out, okay, how can I participate? So writing about artists, then curating exhibitions. And I think within curation, I've kind of found my artistic path, right?
Hmm.
Because that's still a collaboration with artists, galleries, institutions, but it allows me to have a lot more control in the storytelling and the platforms that I use. So I started curating in 2008, but I was also working a job, 9 to 5. And in 2015, I was working at Nickelodeon doing digital marketing. And, I was super open about what I was doing in the arts. It wasn't like a secret life.
Right. Right. Right.
And my boss at the time, Angelita Sierra, who gave me one of the greatest gifts by firing me. She
That
was
part. Say
like,
that again. Say that again.
the greatest gifts. You know, I think at the time, you know, I was 35. I'm 43 now. And I had read this Jack Ma quote: "If you're 35 and broke, you deserve it." And I was like, "Damn,
Hmm.
that's like a gut punch." But I got what he said in terms of like, if you're not really chasing what it is that feeds you,
What are you doing?
what's the point? You know. And so she offered me an opportunity to step into the fullness of myself.
Mm.
So it wasn't like you're done Friday. Like I had like 3 months notice, but she was like, "Look, you're really passionate about this thing, and it would be a disservice to yourself to not go for it full time. You can always find a marketing job, but
Mm.
you're not going to have many opportunities, because I'm not married, I don't have children. So my responsibilities are just kind of like my immediate family and myself.
And
So
your
why not
purpose.
go for it? And my purpose. And uh, so from 2015 until now, I've been curating full time. Co-founded Art Noir in 2013, which is a collective which for me has been an extension of the practice, but allows me to tap into that marketing, advertising, organizing, gathering kind of skill set with 6 other co-founders. So I can do my thing, and then when we need to kind of expand the reach, then it's like we come together like Voltron, and then you know do it in a much more broader sense.
What a beautiful journey to walk everyone through of how you got here. And there's so many elements that make what you do and the level in which you do it so well make even more sense. Like I didn't know about your extensive passion and love for music at the level in which you were. Finding out the gift of being fired by somebody and how you position, because everything is positioning and perspective, right?
Totally.
And you had a total understanding of this was forcing you even more to step into your purpose and the thing that you were passionate about so much. So everybody says, don't quit your day job. You didn't quit your daydream, right?
Yeah.
A mutual friend, Ingrid, came on here
Oh
and,
yeah,
and
yeah.
dropped that one, and that hit me. Said never quit your daydream. You can quit your day job, never quit your daydream. And we're so programmed to think the opposite. So to hear it happen to you, not with the quitting, but the forcing, quote unquote, like losing a job, but somebody knowing there's something bigger for you out there is so great. And when I hear you talk, I go back to the music piece when you talked about the LAs and the Puffs and their influence and kind of how you saw yourself growing into that space. I think in general, with talent and artists, sometimes are only as good as a team that represents them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And when I look at you represent you and how you represent yourself, you are the type of leader that's so necessary to lead the charge of what I call elevating and evolving this Black art culture. And
Mm.
your vision and your passion, as many are already hearing, around the diaspora is so necessary and super refreshing. With your involvement within the art world, what was a moment for you that you remember clearly when Black art in particular started to play a big influence in youth culture or culture as we know it today?
So I often answer that question with like from this perspective that people who are invested in it, it's always played a role,
Mm,
right? Because if you look at something like the Cosby Show, people don't realize that a lot of the art was curated. It wasn't arbitrary. Those are masters,
that's right.
right? So I
Was that
think
James Ball? Whose work was on the wall?
I want to say he probably had like Norman Lewis, a lot of kind of black abstract
That's
artists,
right.
but he was gently advocating, right? Because I think people don't really realize how much TV in the 80s in particular shaped our visual understanding of what life could be as a person. Forget like as a black person, right? Because
Yep.
like one of the many things I did, me and my friend Style Akira, we wrote a book chapter looking at how television influences internal interior aesthetics, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so to after the war, you get the TV. Before that, you don't really know what somebody's house looked like unless you went there or you
That's
looked
right.
in the Sears catalog. And so, for me, I think we've always been there, but I would say within the last 10 years in terms of like an amplification. I would say last 10 years, right? So for me, a turning point is when Okenwian was a, incredible mind curator, curated the Venice Biennial in 2015, right? And I believe he might have been the first black curator of Nigerian descent. And he was like, if you're a curator, for most curators, he was like the dude. He was
Right.
suave, he was smart. Like I would just watch his YouTube videos just to like study his diction and how he said things, right? And he curated this masterpiece of a biennial. And for those who don't know what a biennial is, it's almost like the Olympics of art,
Hmm.
right? And it happens every 2 years. I believe Venice is the oldest one. And to see all these black and brown folks in Venice to experience what this man and his team put together, to sit on the canal with my buddy Steven Burks, who's an incredible artist and industrial designer, I was like, oh, things is changing.
That's right.
The pendulum is shifting, and then I think, artists like Kehinde Wiley and what he's been able to do in terms of like really amplifying the culture, and you could go back to when he did hip hop honors and he did the
Right.
paintings of the different folks,
That's
right?
right.
Um, I think about artists like Solange Knowles when the last album, not this one, the one before, with Cranes in the Sky, and she's doing all these concerts in museums, you know. So there are a multitude of moments, but I think what's really been helpful is just the internet, social media.
Right.
Um, I think this reconnection between art and fashion and music, because in the 80s, if you think about like MTV Raps, they used to have these vignettes with artists,
Mm-hmm.
and that's for some reason went away, right? And there's this belief that these various forms of creative expression are separate when they're very one and the same, particularly if you're talking about urban centers, black and brown communities. Like you could be a poet as much as you're a musician, as much as you're a painter. Like Miles Davis was a painter,
That's right.
a pretty good painter,
That's right.
right? And you had a lot of cats like a David Hammonds who like is super inspired by jazz,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's always been there in our communities. I think it's just now it's kind of mushroomed because
Right.
now we have all these tools at our disposal in terms of discovery, in terms of engagement. Obviously, things have changed with regard to institutions being able to, like, the exhibition I have up at the Seattle Art Museum, being able to go to museums and see work by folks that look like me and you.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
so I think it's a constellation of kind of moments, but
Yeah.
there's still so much work that needs to be done.
So much, so much. Agree. And so, with that, in your opinion, what's the unique impact of Black art on overall art culture, and why do you think it's so important to kind of celebrate and support that?
Well, I think Black art from the diaspora, is intuitive, good. So let me make a distinction.
Yeah.
Just because you make it doesn't mean it's good, right? So good art is intuitive, it's evocative, it invites questions, it invites reflection, um, it stirs the spirit. You don't need to necessarily explain it, right? And so there's a history of that. If you're thinking about, what they term outsider artists, I like to call them intuitive artists who are just self-taught, artists
Right.
who just need to make, right? And they
That's
just
right. And
need
create.
to kind of like create. And I think, our diaspora, our community has just always been the leaders of that. I mean, if you think about from a music standpoint, I think almost every form of American music was created by Black folks.
Mm,
So jazz, blues, rock and roll, hip hop,
hmm.
you know, reggaeton, you
Yep.
know. And so I think the capacity for Black creatives from the diaspora to kind of timestamp what's happening in their community,
Hmm.
right? Whether it's be in the moment or be ahead of the moment in terms of setting the trends. And a lot of that comes from necessity,
Mm,
right? So, like, I often tell people, in addition to music, graffiti is my entry point to art. I grew up
I
in the
can see that.
Bronx,
Yep. That's right.
you
That's right.
know?
It was all over.
And
Yeah.
if you Google pictures of the Bronx, you have these beautiful mosaics
That's right.
of art, public art. That for me is the first public art on
One
trains.
thousand percent. Those were the canvases we saw pictures painted on in our childhood.
And a
Walls,
lot of that,
trains.
yeah. And a lot of that is out of necessity to express, necessity of frustration. And so I think we've unfortunately always had to navigate um, being pushed to the margins, and then, using our creative expression to push back.
Mm,
And I think it's only really now in the last 20, 30 years that, we're probably more consistently monetizing that expression and then creating pipelines for other people to come through and do their thing.
which is the
I
goal,
think,
which has to be
yeah,
the
because,
end goal.
yeah, so, yeah, I think it's intuitive, it's raw, it's evocative, and it's just soulful, right? For
Yeah.
me, I always tell artists, when I'm mentoring artists, like, I know 100 people more talented than you are. And so it's not about just talent.
That's
Like,
right.
how do you excavate your inner feelings and put that out and express that through whatever medium you're choosing to express it? That's what
And
people are going to connect to.
yeah, and I think all those descriptives that you just beautifully articulated are key superpowers that I think we bring to way more things than we even give ourselves credit or pay
Of
attention
course.
to. Right? So it's such a superpower that many of us need to re-engage with, and utilize for the betterment of the change that is definitely necessary within our day-to-day lives. And when I think of that, and then as I look at the culture, right, as the culture as we know it right now, how do we kind of shift this mindset of the purchasing and investing in art as an asset over some of the many things that we found what I call our comfort in putting our money towards for years: cars, clothes, accessories, all the things. I think there's a significant shift that can take place. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how we can do that piece.
Well, I think for individuals who are interested in, because I like to say that, I'm a steward of the art in my collection. I can't take it with
Mm.
me when I'm no longer here. Right? It's not
Right.
something I can, you know. And so for me, it's like deciding what you're in it for, right?
Mm.
Because if it's purely investment, you're going to go down one particular path in terms of like really trying to identify artists who you feel have an upward trajectory that, down the line, there's a profit potential that can be realized, right? And then you have people who are in it because, they have a family and they want their children to grow up with images or iconography that emboldens their identity as individuals, right? But you can also have both.
I was just about to
So
say, and both can provide the same outcome of what I would think is hopefully generational wealth,
yeah,
figuratively and
yeah,
literally.
yeah. And I think, but the thing is, like, figuratively is not always guaranteed. I mean, that's a seasoned eye and a lot of
Yep.
research and all that stuff. But I think, um, in terms of psychographic and culture, yes, right? And so I think it's this understanding, like, what's going to really add value to your life. Like, a car, unless it's a particular car that's going to be worth something down the line, is just a machine,
Mm.
right? And I think, it's getting out of this habit of also trying to impress each other,
That's right.
right? And like really what's going to feed you personally, feed your family, and is going to create that generational wealth and understanding, but also confidence, right? Like I love it. My friends now who have children, like I was in Vancouver a couple weeks ago with my friend's daughter, and I was looking through like some images or something, and she's 5, and I'm
Hmm.
like, "What do you think of these?" She was like, "I like this one. I don't like this one. I like that one." I'm like, "Why?" And she was able to clearly articulate,
Articulate that.
yeah, because I think also like, not to sound like hokey, but I would say like if you are blessed to have a family, I would say that's the primary reason because art's capacity to give kids the tools to develop cognitive understanding and expression, is bar none. That's why you see some communities, their kids are playing the piano, right?
That's
Not
right.
because they want to become a concert pianist, but it's developing a muscle in the mind that, a book can't always give you, right? Um, but I think also just kind of realizing that things like clothes, again, if it's not specific things, if it ain't that Birkin bag that's going to be worth something and have some
That's
stored
right.
value, it's it's fleeting, right? So what are the things that are not fleeting, that are self-sustaining, that will evolve? I mean, think about like the painting behind you, how like your relationship will change with that over time.
That's right.
And there are very few things in life that do that, beyond art. Maybe a song, like music is probably comparable, maybe cinema, but like imagine going to see a painting. I mean, it's happened to me. Like a painting I've been looking at for 2 years, and one day I just kind of realized this one little detail.
That's right. A
And
hidden
I'm just like,
discovery that
oh,
comes up.
yeah. And so I think it's about prioritizing. I think at the
Yeah.
end of the day, um, things have gotten better. Generally, there's still a lot of work to be done. Supreme Court striking down affirmative action. But I think you have a lot more friends and colleagues with disposable income. I said now it's, collectively, not that you want to count people's pockets, but what are you doing with that money that is going to enrich your life, your family's life, and potentially could have a future value, you
Yeah.
know?
And you said a whole lot of amazing things, but when you talk about prioritization and you talked about the correlation to that with your children and the confidence that art can bring them. I thought that was a very powerful thing because as parents, children are gifts from God, and it's our job to ensure that we're pouring into them and figuring out how they're bent and resourcing whatever those things are, right? And getting behind it. And part of doing that is building a firm foundation of self awareness, of confidence, and boldness, unapologetic, right? And the way you articulated how art can play a role within that was powerful for me to even hear, right? As I look at the artwork I have in my home for my three daughters, not I didn't even think about, okay, now they get to see art of beautiful images that happen to look like them and what that's reinforcing to them. That's a tool in the toolbox of how we're investing in the confidence in the platform of our youth to become the best versions of themselves. So I'm grateful that you hit that from a prioritization standpoint, right? In terms of the why. And so within that, there's got to be some artists that have done some amazing things. And I would love to hear it. Can you highlight a specific example of a Black artist whose work has made a significant impact on the art world and why their success is kind of crucial to the larger conversation of supporting Black artists?
Man, I mean, there's there's so many examples. I'm trying to meditate on like who would be great. Well, one, I mean, right here, and you can tell it's important because it's by
It's right
me.
in front of you.
Chris O'Feely. I don't know if you're familiar with Chris O'Feely's
I'm not.
work. British Nigerian artist, part of the YBA's Young British Artists. Um, it's a crew of them. So like him, Damien Hirst, Tracy Emmons, they all came out of art school at the same time and basically shook up the art world in the UK in the early
Nice.
90s. But what I love about Chris's work is that he's thinking about um, myth, folklore, our relationship to religion, and the image making is just like I'll look for a quick example if I could find one. Um, just images like this, I don't know
Right.
if you can see it,
I
and
can.
it's like, is this one of those things where like if I was a painter and saw it, I'd be like, damn, I gotta get back in the studio,
I gotta get
you
yeah, I
know?
gotta get on my grind because they out here doing it.
Yeah, and it's just like he's a master at his craft, right?
Hmm.
And I think, representing it from a diaspora standpoint, he was living in Trinidad for a little bit, you know, but like telling that black Brit story, which is a story that we don't
Hmm.
always
Here.
kind of know. No,
That's
not
right.
at all. But I think just the power of his imagination, a Kerry James Marshall, who's another master. Puff bought that piece a couple years ago, for a couple bucks. And but he's like the level of excellence, right? And then I think about someone like an Alma Thomas or someone who I love, a Lorna Simpson,
Mm.
who's New York City through and through, and started off with like image making through collage, and then evolving into painting and sculpture. Carrie Mae Weems, who's from Portland, you know,
Ah,
uh, and is like a queen, I would say more contemporary Simone Lee.
okay.
Simone represented the U.S. in the last Venice Biennial, and just like, and also with Rashida Bunbury organized the Loophole of Retreat, which was uh, a conference that was centering the voices of Black women. We were invited, men were invited to participate as witnesses, but
Right.
to see this gathering, right, of hundreds of women
Women in the space.
engaging, like
Love that.
it's one of
Powerful.
those,
That's powerful.
it's one of those experiences where like if I saw you and just said loophole, you'd be like, yeah, it's a
Like it was
shorthand.
magical. Right.
Yeah. So I think Chris and Carrie, I think Simone, what she's been able to do in terms of use the platform and then extend and
Hmm.
now create these moments of convening. The Astor Gates, what he's been able to do with the Stony Island Art Bank, taking the old bank in the South Side converting it into an institution. You got the Johnson Publishing archive in there, Frankie Knuckles archive in there. So I think for me personally, it's folks who like do it at a level of excellence in their craft, but then understand that, all right, how do I create platforms that extend my influence? So like
That's right.
Kehinde Wiley and Black Rock. I've gone to Black Rock like 3 times, and what does it mean to be a son of the diaspora, to go spend time in this space, beautiful space, and be able to create, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on my own terms. And there isn't this struggle per se. It's just like, these are the things that you deserve,
That's right.
right? And how do you lean into that? And so, yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time. And I mean, you have young artists like someone who I'm super bullish on, Chase Hall, who's going to have an exhibition in New York at David Kordansky and Pace
Mm-hmm.
Prince. So he's giving you a DMX double album, 2 shows, opening 2 days apart in September. Um, but super astute brother. Painting, photography, sculpture. So it's a multitude of folks, and I think for me, if there's anything I can encourage people to do is to see as much art as you can,
Right.
because that's how you
Right. Digest,
train
take it
your eye.
in, absorb, be a sponge. And
Yeah,
along these lines, as you went down all these amazing individuals, I'm looking at this art culture very similar to that as the stock market, right? And looking
yeah.
to find and share those artists who may be on the verge of like this major trajectory. Who are three artists that you would share as someone to kind of invest in now while their rates may be a little bit more accessible than they probably will be in the very near future?
Yeah. So I mean, for me, when I think about investment, it's investing in the artist's ideas and the practice. So I think definitely Chase Hall. I mean, Chase has a show in Aspen, 2-person show with Jackson Pollock. So imagine this young brother's work is in conversation with Jackson Pollock, who is revered by many, right? And he's
Mm,
tussling with Pollock's work. Um, who else that's approachable? That's a good question.
yeah, and
um,
that's all relative, right? But
yeah, I think a Bunny Ramirez, dope artist from Dominican Republic, based here in the tri-state area. It's gonna have an incredible solo show at Deitch Gallery this fall. Um, Tamashi Jackson,
mm,
who's also an incredible artist who has an exhibition now at the MCA Denver. Katura Davis, LA-based artist. Katura and I have been friends since I started in the game.
nice,
And to see her evolve as an artist, now as a mom artist, and we got a collaboration that's going to be dropping in the fall. It's going to be
nice.
super dope. Let me think, who else? Oh, I would show you, but Deborah Roberts, who's an
Okay,
incredible artist, OG, based in Austin, Texas, who's going to
nice.
be in an exhibition that I'm putting together in Brazil. And then let me try. Oh, Leela Faye.
There you go. No, you're giving a lot of leads. I just asked for three.
No,
You done gave
no,
people
no, but
five or six.
Leela Faye, because she's in that window. So there's a window of time where you
Right.
got to kind of make a decision.
That's
And
right.
so
That's right.
I met Leela when they were in school. We keep in touch. And I was blessed to have an opportunity to get one of her drawings. She had an
Nice.
incredible solo show at Company Gallery, and it's just like, for me, I encourage people, pay attention to what's coming out of the studio,
Okay.
right? Because I think one thing that I talk to artists about, particularly emerging artists, your capacity to edit what comes out of the studio sometimes is a difference maker. Because
Mm,
just because you made it doesn't mean it's good,
that
right?
part.
And you have some people, think about it in music. You got some people who kind of succumb to the pressure of like I need to do 1,000 features, or I need to drop this single,
Less is
as
more.
opposed to, yeah. And I think if everything that's coming out of the studio is, a heat missile, then it's just like it creates more demand. More
Mm,
people want to be engaged with your practice.
that's
But like
right.
if you got stuff coming out the studio and it's a little uneven, and I'm gonna call it out. I mean, I won't blow them up online, but I will definitely have a conversation with the artist. Like,
As you
yeah,
should. As you should.
I I don't know about that one, or talk to me about why. Because they may have a
Right. Why you
reasoning.
felt this one should come out the studio.
Yeah, but I think looking at what's coming out the studio, judging the consistency, judging the innovation, right? So like another one of my brothers, Derek Forjor, who's gonna have an exhibition this fall in New York. Always trying to push the practice, always trying to innovate, um, and just take it to the next level and surprise you, right? And I think for me, that's the delight where I go see a show and like, damn, I didn't expect that, you know.
I think that's why you are such a great steward in this space because of your ability to also or speak to when you think something may be off or be able to share those notes or those nuggets or at least embark on that conversation with the artist as to the why, right? Because so often we don't want to share the things that we feel might be a miss or a concern or a question. And with that, I would then say, so what are some of the barriers and challenges that Black artists face in terms of receiving, whether it's recognition and the financial support, and how can we address and overcome those obstacles?
Um, I think one of the biggest challenges is, visibility. Like, how do you get your work seen?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I think also people taking risk, because you have a quotient of people who will support an artist because they saw their name on the list or because I said something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have artists who are super talented whose name may never get mentioned, but you may see it and be like, wow, this is interesting. But are you willing to take the risk to support that person's practice and ideas?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think mentorship, I think we need more mentorship,
Ready
not
for
just
that.
for artists in terms of being an artist, but artists as being entrepreneurs,
Mm.
right? Because I think that's a huge gap right now where like you got artists who, you know, and I had this conversation this morning where like during COVID, everybody's home flipping through Instagram. I love this painting. People are buying left and right like it's Amazon, but those artists weren't given the tools to understand that, all right, how do I incorporate myself as a business? How do I make sure my taxes
Mm-hmm.
are paid? How do I take this big bag that I just got and go buy some? So my
And
cats who
stretch it.
bought
Stretch.
property, like the cats who I know who bought property, I'm like, you're good. Because like you may
Mm-hmm.
never sell another painting, but you got a roof over your head, it's paid for, and you can do your thing.
That's right.
Whether people are
That's right.
looking or not. So I think the business part and the financial literacy part, I think for me are key barriers because you have artists who are getting opportunities and don't know how to negotiate.
Mm.
So like someone will say, "Hey, I want to give you an exhibition. These are the terms." And work in the business, everything's negotiable.
Everything.
If
No, everything
you
is a
know,
negotiation.
and if it's the will of these two parties to collaborate, then everybody has to be happy to a degree.
That's
You
right.
know.
That's right.
Um, I think the other thing that I'm finding to be a challenge is that, and it's a piggyback to that point where like you have artists working with galleries who are spiking their price points, you know, with no real kind of reasoning, and
Mm-hmm.
then the artist goes cold, or they have a show that's a dud, and they can't move anything because it's too
Mm-hmm.
expensive, right? Um, your work went from 5 to 15,000. I was with you at 5. I may have been with you at 7,500,
Right.
but
Right.
like you haven't done anything to warrant the 15,000.
Right.
And you're not making appropriate business decisions in collaboration with these galleries, which are business partners. They're not your savior. They're not your whatever. Like they're Salesforce in some
Yeah.
regards. Not all galleries. Some galleries are incredible, so I want to be clear about that. But they are a partner that's helping distribute your work to potential parties who want to be in support of that. And a lot of artists just take what's given to them. I mean, it's very different. Like I remember, I don't know who was I. I was watching an interview with someone and thinking about the record industry, and there's a standard deal,
Hmm.
and it's like, and I think it was LaRussell was like, if it's standard, I don't want it,
Right. That's right.
right? You know, and I think there's certain standards, but there's still things that you can bake in to be specific to your situation.
Right.
Um, I mean, I think for me that's a key thing because I think there are enough platforms to access artists and to get to it, but the artists don't know what to do when the opportunities come, when the money comes,
That's
paying
right.
your
So it's that business,
taxes.
that entrepreneurship, business acumen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if you go to art school, they're not teaching you that,
That's right.
you know. And then
Like
if you're an intuitive artist who's self-taught, then you either got to do it through research or have a
the school
mentor
of
or
life.
someone who, yeah,
The
who can
school of
give you some
life.
game, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
So these are all such great things. And as I look at you again being a steward, and there's this next generation of artists, right? How do you, or how can we encourage and inspire young Black artists to pursue careers in the arts, right? And what resources or initiatives do you think are necessary to kind of provide them with a solid foundation to succeed?
well, so I would say, you know, if you're talking about curators and collectors and other stakeholders, you know, build a relationship with the artist,
Mm.
right? Just don't make it transactional, you know, because I think it's also very easy. You see an artist on Thread, Instagram, whatever, and you're like, wow, I love their work. You DM them, and it's like, what do you have available? And I tell people, nah, just do a studio visit with them, whether that's virtual or in person, and like understand who they are, understand what their ambitions are, understand what their pain points are, because maybe the skill set you have may be able to fill that gap, or you may be able
How
to
about that?
introduce them. You know, I mean, so much of what makes being in this ecosystem special is the relationships that you build,
Yes.
right?
And the
And
community that you become a part of.
exactly. And so I think really identifying artists that you want to be part of your community, your network, right? Because some of these relationships are lifelong. You know, I mentioned mentorship. I think we need more artist residency programs, right? Because everybody isn't necessarily going to go do an MFA,
Hmm.
whether they don't have the interest or can't afford it. So, what are some alternative opportunities where you can still get this camaraderie of being with other artists? Um, and then I would say to artists, particularly black artists, you know, build your foundation of collectors, black collectors, right? I think far too often, and it's not just in art, it's in a multitude of industries. You get a couple of people, you get a little bit of energy behind the practice, and then you forget the people who were there from the beginning,
That's right.
right? And then, you know, life is life, and life will correct things. You know,
That's right.
karma happens, and,
Karma happens.
you know, and who you gonna call,
That's right.
right? But if you got that foundation of collectors who were supporting you from the beginning, because what I think artists don't realize is that these become your evangelists. You know, when
Mm.
they're hosting podcasts, dinner parties, oh, who's this? And being able to like give a coherent background. This isn't just about artists you bought online. No, this is an artist, Joe Schmo, Jackie Joe from Brooklyn. I met them. You know, they're a third generation weaver. Like being able to
Yeah.
tell their story and be an
No,
advocate.
it's crazy that you mentioned that because this is like a full circle moment. I had the pleasure of going to the studio for Brandon Diener, who I believe you're
Yep.
aware of, and
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was a guest on the show. And going into his studio, you were 1000% correct. The connection that was built in seeing his craft and the environment in which he was creating the things he was creating and his why. gave me a deeper appreciation for his craft that I then became an extension and an advocate for him, right? Having him on the show connected him to our very dear friend, mutual dear friend of Glenn, right? All these things I just did because of the experience and that time that was spent in that space getting the true feel for now the creative and the experience and the craft. So I can 100% be an example and agree with exactly what you just said and how real that is. It's so real. And this is the principle that goes beyond art. This
Hmm.
is not you gave a master class of just principles and values that go beyond art. You did it through the sensibility of your superpower and what you do within this art world. But these are principles that go beyond and they go into every industry, every craft, every type of engagement. How are you spending time with the people and the things that you either want to be a part of your ecosystem and your community? And then how do you become an extension of spreading that and advocating that, right? Is the beauty of how things really grow and build. It shouldn't be on the shoulders of just the artist or the
Hmm.
service or the brand. It then becomes part of the responsibility of the others who are now taking it on as this is a part of me now too. I believe in
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
which was beautiful how you articulated. So the future of black art and artists. What do you want to see? What's how do you want to ensure sustained progress, inclusivity, and empowerment? Whatever the descriptives are, I would love to get a sense from you. What's the vision you want to see? Because as a curator, you have somewhat of the keys to do so.
I think if you're thinking about the ecosystem in general, obviously more curators of color, whether they be affiliated with institutions or independent, but having the resources to kind of do this full time. I'm a little different because I come from a marketing background, so I can figure it out.
That's
But not
right.
everybody has that skill set, right? So I think, for me, even just something as simple as like more residencies for curators to just have time to think and get stipends and research. We need more writers um, of color, like critics. It's not
Hmm.
enough to like, oh, I like this watch, it's nice. Like, no, like be critical of it,
That's
because
right.
it's only through like critical feedback that we all grow,
That's
but then
right.
have other points of consideration and access, right? I think you're seeing shifts. There's still so much work that needs to be done, but on the institutional side, more of us in decision making positions.
Positions.
But I think more of us who are conscious, because I'm not under the illusion that just because a black and brown person is in that seat, that they
It's
know
the
what
right
time it
person.
is.
That's right. That's right.
You know, so
That's
more of
right.
the right people in that seat. Um, from an education standpoint, more programs. I mean, obviously, it'd be great to have them formally, but even if they're informally, so kids are getting access to arts from an early age. You unfortunately can't just rely on the family, because if the family structure, if that's not what's happening in the home, at least let them have access to that at school, right? Whether that's an after school program. Um, there's so many different kind of programs now through charter schools. Um, and I think in terms of the artists, I mean, building that entrepreneurial spirit, being advocates for yourself, but then also being advocates for other artists. Like if you got some momentum and some energy, it's just like it's not apples to apples, but it's like when the artist blows up and then they do their joint venture deal and then they're signing other artists. Like not apples to apples, but like bring other people through the
Yeah,
pipeline.
bring it along. We got to bring along. It's not
You
just
know,
us. Significance is bringing the value to others. We have to
exactly.
bring people along. Man, let me tell you something. We usually close these episodes with asking, what are the three seeds you'd want to leave to the stewards of culture moving forward? But you've planted so many seeds in this conversation that I feel like they are flowing all throughout. And I'm so grateful of your transparency. I'm so grateful that this is the path and the journey that you're on, and that you're the representative, one of an amazing one in this space for this culture to truly grow in a way that it deserves to and have the impact that it deserves to have. And I just want to thank you personally for sharing, but more importantly, again, being unapologetic about ensuring that this has the appropriate platform and space.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation and the time.
Yeah, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Larry, you